Good afternoon and welcome to the daily news analysis by Civil Service Institute Pala. Let's look at the top stories of the day. Namibia to roll out UPI. Starlink receives final regulatory clearance for offering SATCOM services in India. Critical mineral club can help India secure and diversify supply chains. Government fast tracks procurement of medium altitude, long endurance class drones to enhance border surveillance. India played key role in bringing out FATF report on terrorist financing. Tapes suggest Hasina ordered deadly crackdown. The Rio Declaration underlined the cohesion within BRICS. And finally, we will be also looking at a mains PYQ and practice question. Moving on to the news in detail, let's start with the first news. Namibia to roll out Unified Payments Interface. Namibia, the African country, will roll out Unified Payments Interface later this year and will set up an entrepreneurship development center, imparting a new momentum to the bilateral ties between India and Namibia. The meeting in Windhoek primarily focused on boosting bilateral cooperation in areas such as digital technology, defense, security, agriculture, healthcare, education, and critical minerals. There was an announcement on the launch of a digital payment system in Namibia later this year as an outcome of the signing of the UPI technology licensing agreement between National Payments Corporation of India and the Bank of Namibia in April last year. Namibia has also joined the India-led Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, that is CDRI, and the much noted Global Biofuels Alliance. CDRI is dedicated to enhancing the resilience infrastructure systems related to climate and disaster risk. It includes national governments, NGOs, private sector, and international organizations. Our Prime Minister also expressed gratitude for the assistance from Namibia with regard to the Project Cheetah. Moving on to the next news. Starlink receives final regulatory clearance for offering SATCOM services in India. Elon Musk-owned Starlink has received the last remaining regulatory clearance from the government, paving the way for the company to start offering SATCOM services in India. In space, that is, Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center has granted authorization to Starlink satellite communications for enabling provisioning of low Earth orbit satellites constellation, namely Starlink Gen 1. In space, authorization to Starlink has a validity period of 5 years from the date of authorization or end of operational life of Gen 1 constellation, whichever is earlier. The Starlink Gen 1 constellation is a global constellation with 4,408 satellites orbiting Earth in altitude varying between 540 to 570 kilometers, capable of providing around 600 gigabits per second throughout India. So in May, the company, that is Starlink, had received an operator license from the Department of Telecommunications 3 years after first applying for one. And on Wednesday, the Indian National Space Promotion Authorization Center granted authorization to the SATCOM company for its satellite constellation. In space operates under the Department of Space. So the government had opted for the administrative route, given that spectrum used for satellite communication is shared spectrum and is technically difficult to auction. While the telcos and Starlink will compete against each other to offer their services in the country, which is expected to cater largely in urban areas, Starlink had already inked separate retail partnerships with platforms like Jio, a subsidiary of Reliance Industries, and Airtel for them to offer its service to their customers. So how do this satellite communication services work? Satellite communication services rely on an array of satellites in orbit to offer connectivity to homes and businesses on the ground. They are an alternative ground-based communication They are an alternative to ground-based communication called terrestrial networks, such as cable, fiber, or digital subscriber line, and they don't require wires to transmit data. Starlink operates the world's largest satellite constellation with around 7,000 satellites in orbit. So for end users, satellite-based communication and broadband services offer benefits on two key points. So what are those two key points? Wider coverage and also more resilient network. Even though the latency of SATCOM services can at times be higher than terrestrial broadband networks, they also can cover vast areas with very little physical equipment needing to be installed. According to the guidelines, SATCOM companies will have to share with the government a year-wise phased manufacturing plan aiming at indigenization to a level of at least 20% of their ground segment of the satellite network that is established at the end of 5 years after launching commercial operations. The companies should also ensure provisioning of NAVIC-based positioning systems in their user terminals on best effort basis, along with a transition plan to implement NAVIC in a time-bound manner by 2029. NAVIC, or Navigation with Indian Constellation, which is India's own GPS system, is India's regional satellite navigation system similar to GPS, which is a global system developed by the US. GPS belongs to the United States of America. Companies will have to provide real-time monitoring to ensure that no user traffic originating from or destined for India is being routed through any other gateway outside Indian territory. They will also have to submit an undertaking that they will not copy or decrypt Indian telecom data outside India. Finally, operators would need to implement service restrictions to any individual, group of subscribers, or certain geographical areas during hostilities, the guidelines said. These companies will also have to seek separate clearance from security perspective for voice service and data service. SATCOM operators will also have to ensure that the data centers are based within the geographical boundary of India and shall make provision to provide domain name system DNS resolution within its territory. Moving on to the next news. This is from the editorial of Indian Express. Critical mineral club can help India secure and diversify supply chains. So the foreign ministers of the Quad countries, so which are the Quad countries, India, Japan, Australia, and the USA, announced the launch of the Critical Minerals Initiative for collaboratively securing and diversifying supply chains. So why was this urgent need for supply chain resilience? A recent global crisis in rare earth magnets after Beijing's imposition of export controls has shown that India's green industries face significant strategic and economic risk due to heavy dependence on China, not only with regard to India, but for the entire world. The only dependence on China being the sole manufacturer of rare earth magnets, is causing a huge problem and risk at the same time. So these mini-lateral groupings or clubs form a key part of India's and other Quad countries' minerals diplomacy. With unexplored domestic reserves and a late start in the global race, India has recently signed a flurry of bilateral minerals partnership agreements with resource-rich countries such as Argentina, famous for the production of lithium, and Zambia, again a mineral-rich country in Africa, aim to facilitate exploration and mining by the Indian government and firms overseas. Indian companies often lack advanced extraction technology and sufficient financial capital to commercialize domestic mining as well as operate competitively in foreign markets. Moreover, the hesitancy about investing abroad in politically unstable jurisdictions like the Sahel region highlights the urgent need for de-risking mechanisms and concessional finance to support overseas ventures. So India's partnerships with countries like UAE, USA, and UK focus primarily on joint ventures for mineral processing and recycling. Minilaterals or mini clubs offer a unique solution where India and other partner countries can coordinate and cooperate and co-develop projects. These small groupings of like-minded partners allow for joint technical, financial, and other diplomatic resources to support innovation across the minerals value chain. So they overcome financial constraints. So these minilaterals together can overcome financial constraints, which is the most important problem for not only for Indian ventures, but also for other countries. By tapping into a broader pool of capital, blended finance mechanisms, and export credit agencies, Indian companies can also leverage advanced technological expertise from countries such as Australia and Japan regarding exploration, mining, and processing. The Minerals Security Partnership, of which India is part, offers ready-made structures for co-financing and strategic project selection. Clubs allow India to ensure economic security and also allow to diversify supply chains, which is the most important thing at the moment, and forge resilient partnerships and secure its place in the emerging clean tech order. Yet, India needs to be strategic when engaging in such groupings to understand how it can balance international partnerships without limiting its national interest and domestic priorities. So India should leverage its role as a bridge between the global north and south. India's ambitions under Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat seek to make the country self-reliant on critical minerals and especially green technologies, while creating incentives for exports-based mineral industries, keeping in compliance with global environmental, social, and governance standards. Moving on to the next news. Here, government fast-tracks procurement of medium-altitude, long-endurance class drones to enhance border surveillance. So in a bid to enhance surveillance along its sea and land borders, India has accelerated the procurement of 87 medium-altitude, long-endurance drones from local manufacturers. The move is aimed at increasing real-time monitoring and operational readiness across critical areas. The drones worth over rupees 20,000 crore will be procured under the Make in India initiative. The aim is promoting indigenously developed drone technology and reduce dependence on foreign suppliers. So the medium altitude class drones will be equipped with advanced surveillance and compact capabilities, including real-time intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance in all kinds of terrain. It should have the capability to fly over 30 hours at an altitude of at least 35,000 feet. So previously, an Israeli company had been supplying these drones to India. So the essential requirement is that it should be 60% indigenous. And the official added that it was the first time Indian manufacturers have been asked to supply medium altitude drones. So we already knew, and we have already seen that Indian security forces are trying to indigenize, keeping in view of Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative. So indigenization of Indian armed forces are currently going on, and this should be seen as a part of that initiative. India played key role in bringing out FATF report on terrorist financing. India was one of the key contributors to the Financial Action Task Force project for putting together the comprehensive update on terrorist financing risk report that was released on Tuesday. It is learned that the United Nations Security Council Counter-Terrorism Committee Executive Directorate and France were the co-leads for the project. India also played a significant role in bringing out the report, which has for the first time recognized state-sponsored terrorism as a means to fund and support terrorism, state sponsorship of terrorism. The report stated that the possibility of governments providing financial and other forms of support to terrorist organizations is a long-standing threat to international peace and security, as well as to the stability of regional financial and political systems. It added that this government support for terrorist activities has come in several forms, including direct financial support, logistical and material support, and the provision of training. The FATF's decision reinforces the position India has held since at least 2022, when it identified Pakistan as a source of terror financing. The findings highlighted in the FATF report are expected to reflect in the framing of subsequent national risk assessments of all the other countries. The United States, in its 2024 National Terrorist Financing Risk Assessment, has already noted that it faced terrorism threats from terror groups in Pakistan, apart from Afghanistan, Southeast Asia, and East Africa. Building resilience, the Rio Declaration underlined the cohesion within BRICS. So as we have seen in yesterday's daily news analysis, the 17th BRICS Summit has concluded in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. And this was the first meeting of the BRICS that included all the newly inducted members, that is Egypt, Ethiopia, UAE, Iran, and Indonesia. Saudi Arabia has not joined the grouping so far. It also followed the US-Israel attacks on Iran's nuclear program and the escalation in Israel's bombardment of Gaza. This was the first summit since the 4-day India-Pakistan conflict in May, and also first after the G7 summit in Canada. The BRICS grouping, seen as the next challenger to global financial order, is in crosshairs with American President Donald Trump. In addition, the group has several internal rivalries that have brought its sustainability into question. In April, the BRICS foreign ministers meeting ended without a joint statement as the African members held up the wording on the expansion of UN Security Council. Despite all these confrontations, India's clarification in March that it is not considering de-dollarization of trade in any form and that there is no unified BRICS position on this issue. In the recently concluded summit, Brazilian President Lula da Silva doubled down on rhetoric against the US, saying that BRICS proves the world doesn't need an emperor. So this shows the grouping's anti-American stance. Despite all these challenges, the Rio Declaration underlined the basic cohesion and consensus within BRICS members on a range of issues. In the joint statement, there was strong language against the attacks on Gaza and condemnation of the strikes on Iran, given the risk to nuclear safety and security. India was able to ensure a paragraph with tough language also being mentioned about the 𝗗𝗃𝗄𝗆 terror attack and references to terror financing and cross-border movement of terrorists. India and Brazil won endorsements of the whole grouping on playing a larger role at the UN, including the UN Security Council. The absence of the Chinese and Russian presidents allowed more space for the non-P5 countries to promote a common vision for the global South, and adding several important resolutions on energy security, climate change, and reordering the World Trade Organization along with UN Security Council. The Rio Declaration also took a stern view of the US moves on tariffs. As India prepares for its leadership in 2026, BRICS now represents about half the global population and around 40% of the global GDP and a quarter of global trade. It can move forward with this consensus, fulfilling the vision for the grouping's acronym that Mr. Modi recasted. Our Prime Minister has given a new acronym to BRICS, which goes like this: building resilience and innovation for cooperation and sustainability. Building resilience and innovation for cooperation and sustainability. So you can take note of this and you can mention such micro sentences in your mains answers. It will enhance your mains answer and it will give you more marks. Moving on to the next news. Tapes suggest Hasina ordered deadly crackdown. Audio recordings analyzed by the BBC suggest Bangladesh fugitive former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina ordered a deadly crackdown on protest last year, allegations for which she is on trial. Up to 1,400 people were killed between July and August 2024, according to the United Nations, when Mrs. Hasina's government ordered a crackdown on protesters in a failed bid to cling to power. Mrs. Hasina has heard the rising security forces to use lethal weapons against protesters. Meanwhile, Bangladesh Interim government leader Muhammad Yunus on Wednesday urged India to be guided by conscience and moral clarity over its handling of extradition request of Mrs. Hasina. Bangladesh in December last year has also sent India a noted verbal requesting the extradition of Mrs. Hasina. New Delhi had confirmed receipt of the formal diplomatic note but did not comment further. So let's wait and watch. Will India extradite Mrs. Hasina to Bangladesh or not? And finally, let's look at the mains practice question. So analyze the reasons behind the growing preference for minilaterals in global politics and discuss the advantages of minilaterals compared to global bodies. So this is a 10-marker question. So you have to write approximately 150 words. So here I have given a model structure of the answer. So let's look at the introduction. Minilaterals are informal initiatives involving a small number of states that aim to address specific threats or security issues within a specific time frame. And they are ad hoc in nature and rely on voluntary commitments from participating countries. You can either use this one or the next one. That is, minilaterals have existed alongside bilateral and multilateral approaches in global governments since the post-war era. The creation of multilateral institutions involved disguised minilateral negotiations among Atlantic powers led by the United States. Or you can use your own introduction. And coming to the main body, in recent years, there has been a steady proliferation of minilateral initiatives in the areas of trade, security, finance, and climate change. And the certain reasons for this are inertia and stagnation in multilaterals. Multilateral organizations face hurdles in decision making due to their formal structures and diverse membership. The changing global order raises questions about their continued relevance. The best example is UN Security Council. So it is high time that we expand the permanent membership. Currently, we only have 5 permanent members. So it's high time that we expand the permanent membership. The growing importance of strategic alliances over global cooperation. These initiatives can facilitate issue-specific partnerships between like-minded countries. And the best example is Quad, which envisions a free, fair, and open, inclusive Indo-Pacific. Okay. And rising geopolitical rivalry. Geopolitical rivalry and a multipolar world have strained multilateral organizations, leading to stalled decision-making and institutional reforms. So there is the debate going on between the global north and the global south. And growth of ICT. Technological advancements have facilitated global and regional cooperation by expanding networks and enabling less formal means of communication. Capacity constraints of countries. China's territorial disputes with neighbors challenge minilateralism due to its aggressive behavior and the power disparity with smaller countries. China has been recently very aggressive with regard to rare earth magnets and its export control regime. So to counter China, we have groupings like Quad, Saga, BIMSTEC, and especially to counter China's Belt and Road Initiative, India has its own string of pearls. So you can quote all these examples in your answers. It will enhance your answer and it will give you more marks. Cooperation in humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. Freedom of navigation, rule of law, and the rules-based order are key drivers of minilateralism in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, the advantages of minilaterals are bring in balance of power. Disputes with China have compelled India and other Indo-Pacific countries to adopt a power-centric approach in shaping the regional order, contrary to their historical stance. Coming together of like-minded partners, India's multilateral engagement strengthens military preparedness and interoperability through agreements with key Indo-Pacific powers. So this will also give a bottom-up approach for the countries and not like the top-down approach, just being practiced in institutions like UNSC or World Trade Organization, etc. The slower pace of multilateral bodies. Plurilateral initiatives have shown greater success in international trade regulation than multilateral agreements. For example, because of the slow pace of the Doha trade negotiations, countries have increasingly explored minilateral and plurilateral mechanisms to renegotiate tariffs and remove trade barriers. Now, absence of formal institutions. Minilaterals operate without formal institutions or physical offices, allowing member states to determine objectives and priorities based on pressing issues. However, rise of these minilaterals is also associated with certain disadvantages and limitations. Some of them are impact of multilaterals. Multilaterals can undermine the role of regional multilateral institutions like ASEAN, ARF, East Asia Summit, etc., weakening their neutrality and centrality. And it can also, the minilaterals also can increase the deep divide between developed countries and developing countries, and also can increase the divide between global south and global north. Impact on global organizations. Minilaterals undermine the international organizations like United Nations, impacting their relevance and work programs. Impact on global governance. Minilaterals can fragment global governance mechanisms and escalate greater power competition, hindering cooperation. So the best example is Shanghai Cooperation Organization and Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank led by China, which compete with G20 and G7 led by the West, forming parallel power structures. And in the conclusion, you can mention minilaterals foster political dialogue and confidence building among key partners, paving the way for streamlined negotiations in multilateral platforms and advancing international cooperations. Okay, so I hope this is clear. So with this, we come to an end of the session. Thank you. Have a nice day.